"You thief, that's my car." Those words sliced through the morning air before I even had a chance to process what was happening. I froze, my hand still resting on the garage door handle, my heart pounding in my chest like I'd just been caught in some kind of crime scene. Only I hadn't done anything wrong. I was standing in front of my own house, opening my own garage, about to grab my own car, when my neighbor, the infamous HOA Karen, came storming across the street like a furious tornado. Her finger shot out toward me, her voice climbing louder with every word. "You stole it, that's my car. You broke into my garage and drove it here." For a second, I genuinely thought she was joking. Maybe she had mistaken me for someone else, or maybe this was one of her weird attempts at neighborhood watchdog heroics. But the way her face flushed red, the veins popping on her forehead, and the way her voice cracked from screaming, it was clear. She wasn't joking. She was dead serious. Now let me paint you a picture of Karen. Everyone has that one neighbor, the one who takes the HOA rules like they're carved in stone from the heavens. She was the kind of person who measured lawns with a ruler, who sent warning emails if your trash bin was visible for even 2 minutes past collection day, who believed she had the right to boss around anyone within a 10-house radius. She wore oversized sunglasses like a badge of authority and always carried a clipboard, as though she were preparing to write you a citation for existing. That was Karen, and if she decided you were guilty of something, in her mind, that was the truth. No questions asked. So there I was, standing in my own driveway, staring at my silver SUV, the car I had saved up for, researched endlessly, and finally bought over a year ago. The car that had sat in this garage night after night through rain, storms, and sunny days. A car that bore my name on the title, registration, and insurance. Yet suddenly, in Karen's alternate universe, I was a criminal who had stolen the vehicle she had just bought. I blinked, trying to process. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice half confused, half incredulous. But Karen wasn't listening. She was already pulling out her phone, jabbing at the screen with her manicured finger. "Don't try to talk your way out of this," she shouted. "I saw this exact car at the dealership yesterday, and I told them I wanted it. They said it would be delivered, and here it is, in your garage. You think you're clever, don't you? Well, not on my watch." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was so absurd, so ridiculous that it was either laugh or lose my mind. "Karen, this car has been mine for over a year. I have the papers inside if you need to see them. You've seen me drive it every single day." But Karen wasn't having. She snapped her fingers at me like she was some kind of police chief. "Save it for the officers. I'm calling 911. And just like that, she did. Right there in the middle of our peaceful Saturday morning, with neighbors slowly peeking, through blinds and front doors cracking open, Karen called the police to report her neighbor for grand theft auto. I stood there stunned as her shrill voice carried across the street. "Yes, officer. I'd like to report a stolen car. Yes, the thief is here right now. He's pretending it's his, but it's mine. I just bought it yesterday. Please hurry." It felt surreal, like I had been sucked into some bad reality show, only I hadn't signed up to be on camera. My pulse quickened as the weight of what she was doing settled in. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was dangerous. False accusations can spiral out of control, especially when the police get involved. What if they didn't believe me? What if they showed up ready to arrest first and ask questions later? Neighbors whispered among themselves. A few looked at me with sympathy, but others, influenced by Karen's unrelenting confidence, seemed sure. After all, when someone screams with enough conviction, people tend to believe them. I wanted to shout, to defend myself right then and there, but something told me it wouldn't matter. Karen lived for drama. The louder she got, the more powerful she felt, and now she had an audience. So I stood there, hands slightly raised, taking deep breaths to keep calm, while Karen paced the sidewalk like she had just caught a wanted criminal. Her sunglasses flashed in the sun, her phone glued to her ear, and her voice rose higher with every exaggerated claim she made to the 911 operator. And as I listened to her weaving lies about her stolen car and the thief next door, I realized something chilling. Karen wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was trying to ruin me. Karen wasn't the kind of neighbor who whispered her complaints politely. No, she was the type who turned every minor inconvenience into a neighborhood spectacle, and that morning she decided to turn me into the star of her latest show. Her voice carried like a megaphone, echoing down the entire block as she pointed furiously at me and my car. "That's it! That's my car!" she bellowed, stomping one heel onto the driveway like a child throwing a tantrum. "I signed the papers yesterday. He broke into my garage last night and drove it here. Everyone look, he's standing there like nothing happened." It didn't take long before the neighborhood turned into an audience. Blinds were tilted open, doors cracked just enough for faces to peek through, and soon my quiet street resembled a small-town theater, with Karen as the lead actress and me as the villain in her made-up crime drama. A few of my neighbors, who'd seen her antics before, rolled their eyes, but others looked uneasy, whispering to each other as if maybe, just maybe, Karen was telling the truth. I stood frozen, gripping my keys so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Karen, stop," I said firmly. "This car is mine. I bought it last. Here. You've seen me driving it to work almost every day. How could you think I stole it?" She laughed, one of those sarcastic, mocking laughs that made my stomach twist. "Oh, please don't try that act with me. I know what I saw at the dealership yesterday. A silver SUV just like this one, same trim, same wheels. The salesman told me it would be delivered soon, and then magically I see it sitting in your garage. Do you think I'm stupid? You must have bribed someone to switch paperwork." Her logic was as twisted as her temper, but the way she spoke, loud, certain, almost theatrical, gave her an edge. People tend to believe confidence over common sense. My neighbor 2 houses down, Mr. Grant, shuffled onto his porch and called out, "Karen, are you sure about this?" "I've seen him with that car for months now." Karen whipped around and pointed at him too. "That's what he wants you to think. Thieves are clever, Mr. Grant. They'll make you believe something until you find out too late." Then she turned back to me with narrowed eyes. "You can't just parade around with my car and expect me not to notice. You've made a big mistake, and the police are on their way." A pit formed in my stomach. The fact that she'd called the cops wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. All it would take was one wrong assumption, and I could end up cuffed in front of everyone, guilty until proven innocent. I pictured myself trying to explain to officers that the car I'd worked so hard for was really mine while Karen shrieked lies in the background. The thought made my blood boil. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I have the registration inside the house. The title, the insurance card. Everything has my name on it. I can prove it in 2 minutes." But she wasn't listening. She never listened. She crossed her arms and tapped her foot, glaring at me like she had already won. "Don't even bother. Criminals always have fake paperwork ready. The police will see right through you." Her words hit like a slap. Fake paperwork. Now she was inventing a whole conspiracy out of thin air. And the worst part? Some of the neighbors seemed to be buying into her act. I could see it in their faces. Hesitant, uncertain, like they weren't sure who to believe. A couple across the street whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Karen's outrage and my stunned silence. To them, this must have looked like a neighborhood scandal unfolding in real time, and people love drama, even when it's built on lies. I clenched my jaw and forced myself not to yell back. I knew if I raised my voice, I'd look guilty, and that was exactly what Karen wanted, to provoke me, to push me into a reaction that would make me look like the aggressor. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't slowing down. She paced in small circles, phone still clutched in her hand, muttering loudly about how justice would be served and thieves always get caught. Every sentence was another nail she tried to hammer into the coffin she'd built for me. I looked at my SUV, sitting innocently in the driveway, gleaming in the sun. I remembered the day I bought it, how proud I felt driving it home, how it symbolized months of saving and sacrifice. And now, in front of all my neighbors, I was being told I didn't deserve it, that it wasn't even mine. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a stone. I could feel my reputation crumbling with Every lie, Karen shouted. In the eyes of some, I was no longer just their neighbor. I was the guy who might have stolen a car. And that's a stain that doesn't wash off easily. But as humiliating as it was, I knew one thing for certain. The truth was on my side. I had the paperwork, the proof, the facts. And once the police arrived, Karen's little performance would collapse under its own weight. At least that's what I hoped. Because as I glanced at her smug face and heard the distant wail of sirens growing closer, I realized this battle was only just beginning. The sirens grew louder, echoing off the houses like a warning bell. My stomach sank. This was it. The police were coming, and thanks to Karen's wild accusations, I was about to face them not as an innocent homeowner, but as the so-called car thief of the neighborhood. 2 squad cars rolled up to the curb, lights flashing blue and red, painting the quiet street in chaos. Karen straightened up immediately, smoothing her blouse as if preparing to receive an award. Her smug expression widened into a grin. To her, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was her moment of glory. She bolted toward the first officer before his boots even touched the pavement. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she cried dramatically, pointing straight at me as if she were unveiling a criminal mastermind. "That's the man. He stole my car and hid it in his garage." Her voice cracked with fake urgency, and I swear she even dabbed at her eyes as if she were fighting back tears. The theatrics would have been comical if they weren't so dangerous. The officers looked from her to me, their faces unreadable. One of them, a tall man with a stern jaw, approached cautiously. "Sir, can you tell us what's going on here?" Took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. The last thing I needed was to look agitated or defensive. "Yes, officer. This car is mine. I've owned it for over a year. I have the registration, title, and insurance inside my house. I can show you all the documents right now." Karen jumped in before I could finish. "Don't believe him, he's lying. I just bought this exact car yesterday from a dealership across town. He must have broken in and switched plates or forged paperwork. Criminals do that, you know. The Second officer, shorter but with sharp eyes, turned to her. "Ma'am, do you have any proof of ownership? A title? Registration? Bill of sale?" Karen's confidence faltered for a split second. She stammered, "Well, not yet. The dealership said they'd mail everything. But I signed the papers. This is my car." "I know it is." The taller officer sighed, clearly unimpressed. He glanced at me again. "Sir, would you mind showing us your paperwork?" "Of course," I said quickly. "It's inside. I'll be right back." I hurried into the house, my heart pounding in my chest. As I grabbed the folder from my desk, neatly organized with the title, registration, and insurance card, I couldn't help but think about how insane this all was. Here I was, fetching proof of ownership for my own car, just to defend myself against a neighbor who lived in her own delusional universe. When I returned, the officers were still listening to Karen rant about how criminals are clever and dealerships make mistakes. Her voice was shrill, but I could tell by the looks on their faces that the officers weren't buying it. I handed over the documents. "Here's the title, registration, and insurance. All current. All in my..." The officer flipped through them carefully, his eyes scanning each page. He looked at the VIN number on the documents, then at the one etched into my SUV. Perfect match. My name and address were printed clearly on everything. There was no mistake. Finally, he closed the folder and handed it back. "Everything checks. Out. This is his vehicle." Karen's smirk vanished. "No, that can't be right. He must have forged them. He probably has a friend at the DMV. You can't just take his word for it." The shorter officer turned to her, his patience clearly running out. "Ma'am, unless you can provide any legitimate proof that this vehicle belongs to you, there's nothing to suggest he's done anything wrong. Do you have any paperwork at all?" Karen's face flushed crimson. She crossed her arms, sputtering. "Well, no, not right now. But I know it's mine. I wouldn't call you if I wasn't sure." The taller officer exchanged a glance with his partner, then addressed her firmly. "Ma'am, Making false accusations and wasting police resources is a serious matter. Do you understand that? Her jaw dropped. False accusations? Are you saying you believe him over me? The officer's tone sharpened. We don't believe anyone, we go by evidence. And the evidence is very clear. This car belongs to him. If you continue with these claims without proof, you could face consequences for filing a false report. For the first time that morning, Karen's confidence cracked. Her shoulders sagged, her hands fidgeted nervously. She tried one last weak attempt. Maybe the dealership gave me the wrong VIN number. Maybe they delivered it early by mistake. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, that's between you and your dealership, but this man is not a thief and this car is not yours. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but also anger. Anger that I had been put through this circus. Anger that I'd been treated like a criminal in front of my neighbors. The officers turned back to me, their tone softer. Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. We deal with misunderstandings, but this one got out of hand. If she bothers you again, file a report with the HOA, or even a restraining order if necessary. I nodded, thanking them, though my eyes remained locked on Karen. She stood there, red-faced, muttering under her breath, unable to admit she was wrong. The flashing lights faded as the squad cars pulled away, but the damage was done. My neighbors had seen the whole scene. Some offered me sympathetic looks while others just shook their heads, embarrassed for our community. Karen, however, didn't disappear quietly. As she stomped back to her house, she shouted one last thing. This isn't over. You'll regret this. But in that moment, I wasn't the one who looked foolish. The street didn't calm down immediately after the police left. In fact, it felt like the entire block was still buzzing from what had just unfolded. Neighbors lingered on their porches, whispering, shaking their heads, some outright chuckling at the absurdity of it all. But at the center of the storm was Karen, standing stiff on the sidewalk, her face burning red with frustration and humiliation. The officers had made it clear. The car was mine. The documents proved it. And she had absolutely nothing to back up her wild story. But if you know anything about people like Karen, you know that admitting defeat isn't in their vocabulary. Instead of owning up to her mistake, she started weaving an even bigger web of excuses, trying to twist the situation. In her favor, she turned to the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered. Listen, you all saw what happened. Don't let him fool you. These scammers are everywhere these days, fake paperwork, fake IDs. He probably knows someone at the DMV who rigged everything for him. The police are blind to it. I almost laughed. Blind. The officers had checked the VIN number, matched it perfectly with my title, registration, and insurance. What more proof could anyone possibly need? But Karen wasn't talking sense. She was talking loud, and sometimes loud is all it takes to plant seeds of doubt. Karen, I said firmly, stepping closer so the neighbors could hear me too. You accused me of stealing my own car. You called the police on me without a shred of proof. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And still, even after the officers told you you were wrong, you can't admit it? Her eyes darted around nervously. She wasn't expecting me to push, back in front of the whole neighborhood. For a second, I thought maybe she would just drop it, walk away, and lick her wounds in silence. But no, this was Karen. She lifted her chin and snapped back. Don't talk to me like that. I know what I saw. The dealership promised me this car, and if it's not mine, then someone stole it before I could take it home. That's not my fault. The audacity of it nearly left me speechless. Now she was claiming I had stolen the car from the dealership before she even had the chance to own it. My neighbors muttered to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others clearly entertained by the show. Mr. Grant, the older man 2 houses down, spoke up again. Karen, that car has been in his driveway since last year. I walk my dog past here every morning. I've seen it myself. You can't just rewrite reality because you don't like it. A few other neighbors nodded in agreement. The tide was turning, and Karen knew it. Her confidence started to crack further, her words stumbling over themselves. Well, maybe the dealership made a mistake. Maybe they sold my car to him without telling me. That happens, right? That's probably it. I crossed my arms and stared at her. So now your story is that the dealership illegally sold you a car they didn't even have, and then sold me the exact same car last year? Do you hear yourself? Her cheeks flushed even redder, but she doubled down anyway. I don't have to explain myself to you. Just wait. Once I get my papers in the mail, I'll prove everything, and when I do, you'll be the one embarrassed. The bye. Neighbors laughed softly, the sound spreading like ripples in a pond. For once, they weren't laughing at me, they were laughing at her. That broke her. Her shoulders slumped, her arms dropped to her sides, and for a brief moment, I saw the realization flash in her eyes. She knew she had lost, but instead of admitting it, she mumbled something under her breath, spun on her heel and stomped back toward her house. The officers, who hadn't left just yet, called after her. "Ma'am," one said firmly, "you need to understand something. Wasting police resources with false claims can carry legal consequences. If you ever call us again with baseless accusations, you'll be the one facing charges. Do you understand?" Karen froze mid-step, her back stiffening. She didn't answer, but the silence was as loud as any admission of guilt. Then she stormed into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. By the end of the month, the HOA was in shambles. Their threats had lost all bite. Their fines, meaningless. Their authority, questioned at every turn. Dale looked like a man unraveling, barking orders that no one cared to follow anymore, and me, I sat on my dock in the evenings, fishing pole in hand, watching the sunset ripple across the water, knowing that for once, I wasn't just the owner of the lake, I was the one holding all the cards. The weeks that followed were almost like watching a slow-motion collapse. The HOA, once so loud and intimidating, now moved like a wounded animal trying to find its footing. Their letters stopped coming, their empty fines disappeared, and the board meetings that used to draw a crowd suddenly looked half-empty. The neighborhood had changed and everyone could feel it. One by one, residents started approaching me directly. At first, they were cautious, almost embarrassed, like kids caught sneaking candy. They'd knock on my door or catch me by the lake and ask, "So how does this agreement thing work? Do we just talk to you?" Some were worried I'd be strict, but when I explained my system, simple, fair, and transparent, they relaxed. It wasn't complicated. If they wanted to keep their dock, all I asked was a small maintenance fee and a promise to treat the lake respectfully. No hidden fines, no endless rules, no random inspections, just common sense. To my surprise, people embraced it. They liked dealing with a neighbor instead of a faceless board. One man laughed and said, "You're easier to work with than the HOA ever was. At least you actually pick up the phone." Word spread quickly, and soon almost every homeowner around the lake had struck a deal with me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The HOA had spent weeks trying to seize control of my property, and now I was the one setting the terms for half the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the board was unraveling. Dale, once the loud, smug president, couldn't escape the backlash. Homeowners cornered him at meetings, demanding answers. "Did you know we didn't own the lake? Why did you lie to us?" His responses were clumsy, defensive, and full of excuses. The more he tried to talk his way out of it, the clearer it became that he had gambled on bullying me into submission and lost. Eventually, the pressure got too much. Word came through the grapevine that Dale had resigned. Just like that, the man who had stormed onto my property, barking demands like he owned the place, was gone. The board scrambled to replace him, but the damage was already done. Their credibility had been shattered. I'll never forget the day one of the new board members, a woman named Susan, stopped by my house. She looked exhausted, like she'd aged 10 years in a single month. "We're not here to fight you anymore," she said plainly. "The community wants peace. Honestly, most of us are just tired of the drama." Peace. That was all I had wanted from the very beginning. I nodded and told her, as long as the HOA leaves me and my property alone, I won't cause any trouble. She seemed relieved, maybe even grateful, before walking back up the road. From then on, things really did change. The hostility melted away. Neighbors waved when they saw me fishing. Families still gathered on their docks for cookouts and swimming. And no one looked at me like I was the villain anymore. In fact, a few thanked me privately for standing up to the HOA, saying they had wanted to for years, but never had the nerve. It felt strange, almost surreal, going from the neighborhood outcast to the person who had quietly leveled the playing field for everyone. And in the middle of it all, the lake remained exactly what I had always wanted it to be: peaceful. In the evenings, I'd sit at the edge of the dock, watching the water ripple under the sunset, finally able to enjoy the quiet without the constant anxiety of what letter might show up in my mailbox next. The funny thing is, if the HOA had approached me differently from the start, if they'd asked politely, respected my ownership, maybe suggested a fair compromise, I probably would have been open to working with them. I had no desire to be the bad guy. But instead, they stormed in like bullies, full of arrogance and entitlement, convinced they could scare me into handing over what I had rightfully bought. That arrogance became their undoing. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me something important. People like Dale, people who thrive on intimidation and control, only have power as long as others let them. The moment you stand up to them with the truth, their authority crumbles. All it took was a deed, a little backbone, and a refusal to be bullied. And now, not only do I still have my lake, but I also have the satisfaction of knowing the HOA lost its grip over the entire neighborhood because of their own lies. So when people ask me how I handled it, I tell them this: sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling, fighting, or throwing punches. Sometimes it's standing calmly in a crowded room, holding up the truth for everyone to see, and watching the bullies realize they're not nearly as powerful as they thought. In the end, the HOA didn't just lose control of my lake. They lost control of their docks, their authority, and their stranglehold on the neighborhood. And as for me, I got exactly what I had been searching for all along: peace by the water, in a home where the only thing I had to worry about was whether the fish were biting,